My dad had just got off the phone. 10 seconds later, the smoke alarm starts going off. He had narrowly avoided the lightning bolt by about 10 seconds.
Rich, great to have you on the show. And I mean, I wanted to start with what is probably quite an obvious question, but not necessarily an obvious answer. And I wanted to know why you called the album The End of the Middle.
Well, as always, with the album titles, the last four or five, I always wanted to be different ways that you could look at what it means. And I'm thinking about like an older one of mine, The Glass Trunk. There was like all those words had three, four, five different meanings. So, um, yeah, I mean, there's some obvious ones with this album. You know, the middle age and middle class, and some other things. The middle of a person, the core. So those sorts of thoughts. But I don't want to be too clear about it either. I'd like the listeners to arrive at their own conclusions, and hopefully
Of,
they'll be quite varied.
of course. And this seems like obviously the Ruby Chord was quite epic in its scope. And this is much more interested, this album, in the minutiae and the details of people's lives, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the byword for this album was domestic. This I always have like a big flashing word, like Dirk Diggler in Boogie Nights. For previous albums, it's been like contradiction. This one was domesticity, and I'm not really sure why I arrived at that. Um, I was particularly inspired by a bunch of Ozu films I'd watched, like Late Spring and Good Morning, particularly, and a few others. There Was a Father is another one, an older one of his. Um,
He's the Japanese
and
director, yeah?
yeah, from I think he was working from the 20s till mid 50s, and sort of kind of covered the range right from the silent movies through black and white talkies, and then his last four or five films are in beautiful color. Um, and there, he referred to himself as a tofu maker, in that he was essentially making the same thing every time with great care and very small differences in the detail. The same actors, the same storylines, but they all have a uniqueness as well. And so I was inspired by the domestic side of that, but also by the kind of the the kind of economy of materials that he uses to achieve, but the same camera angles, the same shots over and over, the yeah, like I say, the same actors and storylines. But what it produces is this kind of rich tapestry of work he's got. And I sort of thought with the last album being quite um uh, quite a spread, and taking in a lot of this kind of potential future technology, um, and mixing that with the rural, it was quite appealing this time to keep everything very small, and I hadn't done that before, I think. So it was a nice challenge for me as well.
And the instrumentation is very small as well, in the sense that it's stripped back quite often to you and your voice and the guitar, just with occasional flashes of clarinet coming in and things like that. It was deliberately a much smaller musical palette as well, was it?
That's right. Yeah, I wanted it to sort of, well, to be as direct as possible. I was kind of challenging myself a little bit to just rely on the melodies and the words and how those things function, to try and make in a way like the most pop songs I could. But then I knew I was going to undermine them with I was going to undermine any pop sensibility with the lyrics and the manner of the recording. But I wanted it to be really direct, really naked, and a sort of way I've found to put it across in interviews has been to say that I wanted it to be like a newborn goat, So when it sort of first emerges in the barn and it's all covered in goo, that it kind of tries to find its feet and stagger around. And so I was always telling the drummer Andrew to play softer, play gentler. You're not confident, and the same with the guitar playing and the singing. Everything not confident, so it sounds quite weak.
Let's talk about some of the tracks because Bolt is about a house that is struck by lightning. Is that based on a real experience?
Yeah, when like a lot of my songs are probably, a third or a half of them are often drawn from real things that happened, and then I take it somewhere else. This was based on something that happened when I was about 10 or 11. The house got, we didn't know it at the time. We were all in separate rooms and everybody was blinded by this bright white flash, complete whiteout in every room. And then, of course, my mum starts screaming. My dad had just got off the phone in his little office he had because he was a carton salesman. And he had a little fax. You remember a fax machine? Not everybody will. Um, and he got off 10 seconds later. The smoke alarm starts going off. What's on fire? And it was the fax phone he'd just got off, and it was all brown and charred. And so he had narrowly avoided the lightning bolt and the mains electricity by about 10 seconds.
Because it would have come down the wire and hit his ear, wouldn't it, if he'd been on the phone?
Yeah, yeah. Back in
Wow.
those days, there was something like 9 or 10 people a year were killed in this manner. Uh, Not anymore because we're all on our mobiles.
Yeah, of course. And then Boxing Day sales just brings up so much imagery for me, and that sense of you need to treat yourself. You know, you've got to these little things that you do to treat yourself. Is that what you're trying to get across to us? Is the sort of that sense of how do you change your mood by shopping? Is that one of the things that you're trying to say in that?
I think in that song, the character, I have a really nice sense of the character in that song. Even though there's not many words, there's not much room for her to find out about her. But I think she's in a situation in her life that she wants to change, even if she doesn't know it. And I think we all do that when we also do use retail therapy or scrolling therapy or whatever it is, collecting something or to it can be a lovely thing, but it can also put off. It can be a sort of surrogate for actually making real changes. And I think so. The song "You Owe It to Yourself," maybe yeah, you do owe yourself a nice coffee maker or a swanky toaster, but more importantly, you owe it to yourself to own your life and have good responsibility and live your life to the fullest and perhaps not be under the yoke of some you know other person or so the song is like about these shopping on the surface of it, but maybe she's shopping because she needs to. Yeah, she's trying to find a way to make some other kind of changes.
Polytunnel, which really chimed with one of my colleagues who runs an allotment. And that takes the allotment as a jumping off point to discuss friendship and community and things like that. Do you have an allotment?
Yeah, me and Sally got Sally's my partner here. We've got an allotment. Although I must admit, I mean, I had this image of being a gardener and lovely idea of being in touch with the plants and the earth, and I do love nature, but I realized that it was totally stressing us out, and I can't see very well. I've got a visual impairment, so detail is a problem. So I was coming back absolutely covered in cuts and scratches, and I'd pull up things Sally had planted and grown for 3 months. I'd whip it out because I thought it was something else and this kind of thing. So Sally's really good with it, and we've got a patch in our village allotments, which it's sort of on a bank. We're on a bank of the Tyne, and we look over the river to uh, heading on the wall, which is where the Roman wall comes from Newcastle. So we're looking down a valley, so it's a lovely kind of windy spot, and I tend to mainly go in the shed there and make my little funny words.